use my, thank you. I got it. You just go from my screen, Luke.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Luke Peters with the Berkeley Group. Formerly did a lot of work in the Rappahannock River Basin region and now just sporadically, but we are in the solar game and are interested in these discussions. And I don't know how everyone's squares look on your screen, Eldon, but I'd like to introduce Kate Jones, the newest member of our planning team. She's plugging in to get acquainted with what this group does and our contributions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Luke. Nice to see everyone. I'm Kate. Thanks for the introduction, Luke. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Kate, for joining us. Welcome to Hollywood Squares. All right, Deirdre.
Hi, I'm Deirdre Clark with John Marshall Soil and Water Conservation District, serving Fauquier County.
All right, one of our presenters today, Eric.
Yeah, I'm Eric Bronson. I'm the owner of James River Grazing Company. We're a prescribed grazing operation based here in Central Virginia, just east of Richmond. And I also recently took a position, I see one of my coworkers here, Jacob Gilley, with the American Farmland Trust, where I'll be the senior smart solar specialist for the Mid-Atlantic region.
Senior smart solar specialist. Okay. S4. All right. And our other presenter today, Mike.
Hey guys, good morning. Mike Volpe with Open Roads. Thank you for the opportunity to present again. Open Road Renewables is a solar development company that's been active in the Commonwealth since 2016. And we're super excited about pushing the envelope on innovation with regards to trying to identify co-benefits and harmony from a land use and siting perspective. And that'll be today's conversation. Thank you.
Okay, we'll jump to GWRC, Meredith.
Hi, everyone. I'm Meredith Keppel. I'm the environmental planner here at the George Washington Regional Commission, which is based in Fredericksburg, but also serves the 4 surrounding counties.
Thank you. And let's see, it's like somebody who's mobile, B. John.
Yeah, good morning. This is Brian Johnson with Virginia Farm Bureau.
That code, I wasn't able to crack it. Thank you, Brian. Thank you. Okay, and then we got Ryan.
Hey, good morning, guys. Ryan Gilchrist with Open Road Renewables. I'm running all of our Virginia projects, and it's been great to learn a lot about the dual use potential of solar, in particular sheep farming that we've been developing up in Fauquier County.
Thank you. And let's see, another new face, Jacob.
Yeah, Jacob Gilley with American Farmland Trust. I'm the senior technical livestock and grazing specialist based in Central Virginia. My wife and I own and operate a diversified livestock operation as well, but with AFT, pretty much help coordinate our sustainable grazing project. And we recently received a $30 million climate smart commodity project for beef production. We're going to look at carbon sequestration. But used to own some sheep until earlier this year and got out of that business, but very interested in renewable energy and also agrivoltaics, maintaining livestock on the land.
Thank you, Jacob. Hey, stranger, Brian.
Hey, Brian Hoffman. I'm the Deputy Director with Friends of the Rappahannock, and I coordinate the Rappahannock River Roundtable.
Welcome back. And Michelle.
Hi, Michelle Edwards with the Rappahannock Rapidan Regional Commission. Thanks.
And Harrison.
Good morning, Harrison Previn with Culpeper County Planning and Zoning.
And let's see, another new face, Kevin.
Hey, morning, everyone. Kevin Cass with the Piedmont Environmental Council. I'm the Fauquier County Land Use Field Representative for the organization, and this project is located in the county.
Great, thank you. Let's see, I see L. Hughes.
Hey, good morning, Leon Hughes. I'm the Director of Planning and Community Development for Caroline County.
welcome. Well, sorry, didn't mean to step on you, Leon. Welcome and good to see you. I understand the code now. And let's see, Sarah.
Hello, I'm Sarah Holberg, working out of Stanton, and I am working on contract for the Alliance of the Shenandoah Valley, another farming region, on how to deal with solar.
And Sarah, before we finish today, I want you to talk a little bit about the paper you've been working on, but we'll do that after our presentation.
Sure.
Thank you. Scott. You're on mute, Scott. *6. It's so much fun to get off mute on a cell phone. Okay. All right, Scott, we'll come back to you. Tommy.
Here I am, Eldon.
Oh, there you are. Tell us who you're representing.
I'm Vice Chairman of the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District and on the State Association's Legislative Committee. And good morning, Deirdre.
Thank you, Scott. Perseverance. Tommy.
I'm Tommy Blackwell. I'm the Commissioner of the Revenue in Essex County and a friend of the Rappahannock.
Thanks, Tommy. And wrapping up the Fauquier contingent, Adam.
Good morning, Adam Schellinger, Fauquier County Planning.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Good to see some new faces. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mike and to Eric. And I'm guessing, Mike, you're going to go first.
Yeah. Hey, guys. Good morning. This morning's discussion, what we'd like to present is a case study on a specific project that's under development in Alameda in Fauquier County called Alameda Solar. It's a 90 megawatt ground mounted solar project that's being proposed and is currently working through the local process. The relevance of the discussion today, I think, fits into sort of two different buckets. One is the economic impact to the local rural agricultural economy. And then the other is sort of the nuts and bolts of agrivoltaics and solar plus sheep grazing. I'm going to hit the first side of it with some analysis that Mangum Economic Consulting put together that I'd like to present to folks. And then I'm going to pass the mic over to Eric Bronson, who has probably the most experience grazing sheep under solar panels on solar projects in the Commonwealth. So I'm super excited to introduce everybody here to Eric. Eric's really been a source of expertise that's helped us advance our proposal. Before we jump into it, are there any gating questions or thoughts that folks have that we can make sure that we cover either out of the gates or as part of the discussion?
Anyone? I got one when I read your report. You 90 megawatts, and I think if I'm right, and I don't have it sitting in front of me. I think I remember that the acres being developed under solar panel 433 or something like that.
I believe that's right. It should be right around 450, less than 500. Ryan Gilchrist can answer the specific numbers because he has a better sense of the conceptual site plan. Ryan, can you confirm that? I think it's just short of 500.
Yeah, that's about right. Looks like about 460. So yeah, close to 450.
Okay. And I don't want to get us off track, but just as you go through it, you know, the thumb rule we heard in all of our work previously is about 8 to 10 acres per megawatt, and you're running at about 5.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious how that works, but don't get off on that track yet.
No, let's stay on that, because I mean that's part of it, and that's part of the effort. So our rule of thumb is between 5 to 7 acres per megawatt, and this project has what we would consider to be a more compact layout. where part of the innovation in the industry lies is that there's actually some efficiency on conversion from sunlight to electric power, which results in higher energy density panels. Our plan is that this project that's under development in 2023 probably would not go to construction in 2026. So we're able to have a slightly shrunken footprint for the nameplate at that 5 acres per megawatt size, based upon the timing of when the project is forecasted to be installed and the technology roadmap that we're expecting based upon that. What you see is that the module wattage actually is increasing for the same physical footprint of the module as a result of improved conversion efficiency. Great question. Okay, so here's the framing. Here's the setup. As everybody knows, one of the decisions that the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors must determine is that the project is substantially in accord with the comprehensive plan, the 2232 or the COMAR determination. That can be done at the Planning Commission. If it's not found at the Planning Commission, it can be appealed to the board. Also, the way that the siting agreement works is that if a siting agreement is put in place, it establishes that it is substantially in accord. So we look to the county's comprehensive plan to understand what the guidance is that we're looking for to be substantially in accord. And Chapter 8 of the Fauquier County Comprehensive Plan, the Rural Land Plan, states that alternative energy is a potential compatible use. However, alternative energy operations should not detract from the basic agricultural character and economies of the rural lands. So we're really focused on the rural agricultural economic impact of solar. And we know the revenue share versus M&T. We know the voluntary payment. We know the fiscal profile on the tax side. This particular project is forecasted to generate over $20 million of tax benefits to the locality over the 20-year life. But that's not directly responsive to, well, what about the rural agricultural economy? If I can share my screen, which it looks like I can, I would like to present the punchline from the Mangum analysis, which is the comparison of table 11 to table 9. So we did the original Mangum economic analysis to look at what is the impact to the real property, to the M&T versus revenue share, et cetera. That analysis was done, but we've chosen to go a step further in the analysis. And table 11 shows the first round direct economic activity of current row crops across the, call it 500 acres. Table 9 shows the estimated economic impact of the sheep grazing operation. So this is solely the sheep grazing operation. This is independent of the operations and maintenance and the other activity that has a fiscal profile. And what you see, which is, I think, a really interesting observation, is that the row crop activity in terms of wages and benefits provides about $25,000 a year of first round direct economic activity. And the reason that this is that, you know, a farmer who makes a living off of farming probably needs to farm between 1,000 and 1,500 acres to provide the wage benefits, and that the, you know, farming roughly 500 acres of row crops provides, you know, just short of $25,000 of wages and benefits. The total economic output via the sale of the row crop production, and then all of the other inputs that go into it, buying the seed, buying the fertilizer, et cetera, is forecasted at $350,000 per year. So I'm looking at the top row in table 11, the wage benefits around 25 grand, the total economic output around 350,000. If you compare that to the sheep grazing operation, you have a reduction in the total economic output. It's about 2/3 the amount. However, there's 5 times the wage benefit because of the 2 on-site full-time grazers who will be participating in the rural economic activity. This may be somewhat counterintuitive, and it's certainly a finding that we think has relevance in the discussion of the rural economic activity. Further, when you look at the overall output, you sell grain to a global market, and there may be less input to the local economy than the sheep grazing, where you're having services provided by veterinarians. The seed could be procured locally, et cetera. So this is some of the analysis that was done. A bit more about this particular project. So this particular project, to try and be as much in harmony with the local rural economy as possible, if the project moves forward, we are extinguishing all of the future development rights so that the future use after the solar project can only be ag. And we're doing this because we are actually purchasing the acreage. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is we've actually identified a local grazer who's in the livestock business in Fauquier County, who's a Farm Bureau member in Fauquier County, who we have an MOU to be the on-site grazer for the project. And then the third thing, which is incredibly unique to this particular project, we have structured an opportunity for that on-site grazer at the end of the project life to purchase the land at a steep discount to market, so that once the project's decommissioned at the end of the 40-year life, he'll actually have the opportunity and a path to land ownership because of the time that he spent on site doing the land grazing. So that sort of concludes my high-level presentation on it. And I'm happy to answer questions on the topic. And then what I'd like to do is shift gears and have Eric Bronson talk about on-site sheep grazing, the idea of co-benefits, and what are some site attributes that either make it a candidate for on-site sheep grazing or not. So with that, happy to answer any questions on what's I presented thus far, and then pass the mic to Eric. Any questions?
This is Jacob Gilley with AFT. I've got a couple of questions. The first one would be, when looking at the wages and benefits, hiring 2 grazers in comparison to the row crop production, to pencil that, was that analysis done based on the revenue generated solely on sheep sales or lamb sales, or did that also take into account any kind of additional payments for vegetation control?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jacob. The main source of economic activity for the on-site grazer is for vegetation management. So the solar project will purchase the land. The solar project will put up all of the perimeter infrastructure. And then within the fence, the solar project will pay the 2 on-site grazers a monthly fee to graze the sheep and provide the primary means of vegetation management. So that is the main source of the wage is coming from that. There's also the annual sale of selling the livestock to the local market, which Eric can speak more about. But it's a great question, and the primary source of income for the on-site grazers is from the solar project paying those wages for the primary use of the on-site vegetation management by the livestock.
Gotcha. And then my second question is, the model around distinguishing the development rights. I think that's pretty unique, obviously, and the potential for having that land transition to a producer after the 40-year life. I'm curious, if there's a clause in there that you could utilize the existing infrastructure and just update those panels. How does that work? I mean, is it definitely going to be decommissioned after 40 years, or is there an option to continue on with that project in the way that it already is?
Yeah, that's another great question. What is being proposed it will definitely be decommissioned at year 40 and returned to productive ag. In the event that at year 40, the world has changed and everything is under consideration, and it's such that, the needs and the thoughts of the community and whatnot are that it would make sense for it to be repowered as a solar project, that would take board action to go back through the process. But everything that's being proposed in terms of the land use and with the on-site grazer and the transfer of the property, it's expressly a 40-year permit and a 40-year life. And that if at year 40 it was to be contemplated to be repowered, that would take a whole nother permitting application process and all of that work. But the way it's structured is at the year 40 mark, the equipment will be removed. It'll be fully reclaimed. We can talk about soils as well, because there's a baseline soil sampling process that we're proposing to look at all of the objective criteria, both on the chemistry side, the physical structure, and the organic matter. And that as part of the decommissioning obligation, the soil needs to be returned back to the baseline or better on all those objective criteria to ensure that, it's currently in productive ag, and that at the end of the solar project life, as part of the decommissioning process, that the soils are returned to as good or better as the baseline for productive ag post decommissioning.
Harrison, did you have a question? Okay. Other question?
Is there,
Brian?
is there a bond for that decommissioning being held, or how does that work?
Yeah. Yep. There will be a performance bond that's posted prior to start of construction. And what we proposed here is that the bond does not net out the salvage value of the equipment, so that it's fully bonded for the full cost of removal without any netting of the salvage value.
Brian?
I had microphone issues.
Okay. All right. Did you have another follow-up, Harrison?
Originally it was going to be about the whole renewing aspect, which was already answered, but maybe to expand on that a little bit, what was the thought process about making the decommissioning the default instead of making it either or scenario in terms of renewing or decommissioning?
The structure that we're proposing here is that the 40-year market will be decommissioned. And the reason for that is that we believe that it is most in harmony with the rural agricultural community in that it is a temporary conversion to solar. When temporary, I say 40 years, but that the long-term use of the land will be permanently established as ag land, because of all the development rights will be exhausted following the completion of the project.
Okay, Brian, I think you were next.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to see the vegetative cover that you're planning on using, and looking at those warm season native grasses that do so well with those deep root structures, and kind of creating a large sponge for stormwater, which is one of the major concerns that a lot of folks have with these utility scale projects. And so many developers cite that the cost is burdensome for that sort of attribute of a project. So how are you guys able to put that forward, not just as a remedy to that concern, but kind of as a major proponent or, supportive part of your project without the added costs?
Yeah, well, the cost is there. It's unquestionable that the cost is there. We're just more comfortable absorbing that cost than potentially others, because we believe that the fundamentals of doing things right is the way to have the greatest likelihood of adoption. And that on the margin, would you rather do things right and have more adoption, even if it's a slightly higher cost, or not do things at best in class and risk that you don't have the community adoption? So time and time again, our company is sort of pushing the rope on leading innovation taking on economic burdens. Our company was behind the siting agreement legislation on the Walnut project in King Queen. Every project since Walnut has proposed voluntary payments, et cetera. And this area of dual use agrivoltaics, deep-rooted vegetation, very robust perimeter screening is sort of what we believe to be the bleeding edge of innovation. And we are taking risk in absorbing the costs, but that's what we believe is the right thing to do for adoption of the projects that we're developing.
And kind of a tangential follow-up, is your project being developed with the solar panels being considered an impervious surface, which would impact your stormwater management burden? And if so, is the fact that you're using those warm season grasses as vegetative cover going to reduce that stormwater management cost in the long run for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a ton of research on this that NREL is leading under the PV Smart program. Really, really great stuff that Julie Boldhouse from PEC was kind enough to share with us. Great Plains Institute is a third-party consultant. I believe it's University of Minnesota and NREL. I can send along the information. To directly respond to your question, Fauquier County is the permitting authority for erosion, sediment control, and stormwater, and their regs establish that solar panels are impervious. Adam on the line can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but for that, we will be following the regulations of the authority having jurisdiction, and all of the stormwater calcs will follow the regs of the projects being impervious, and we'll look at all of the ins and outs of deep-rooted vegetation, distance between panels, and all of that will flow to the volume, location, and size of the civil BMPs that will be needed to comply with the stormwater regs.
Yeah, I would hope to see a reduction in your burden for constructed BMPs because of the vegetative cover that you're proposing, which would lead to reduced costs. But we'll see, I guess. Really excited to see this project.
Yeah, another element. So a lot of work we did down in King Queen County was in adding specific permit conditions on temporary stabilization, because what we're seeing on stormwater events during construction, one of the real areas of focus is when you're disturbing within the perimeter, you really need to focus on getting seed and straw down as soon as possible to temporarily stabilize the disturbed land. And then you come back with the permanent stabilization seed mix. So you use like a contractor's mix during construction and come back with the deep rooted vegetation. So what you're saying, we're hopeful as well, but there's sort of that period during construction that's as important where you're not going to have the deep rooted vegetation. So we're very sensitive to that. And we actually just shared some updated conditions on getting the temporary stabilization down as part of the disturbance. So just sorry to get so far down into the details on it, but hope that helps.
Thank you.
Hey, Scott, did you want to ask your question you put in the chat?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I apologize if you covered this earlier. I was driving, but my question is, you indicated that the labor associated with grazing was significantly greater in value than the labor associated with row crops. But I was wondering if you looked at the sort of offsite, labor impact, all the vendors who are providing that $350,000, whatever, a material, presumably those people are paying employees to provide those materials and those services. So I was wondering if you looked at that as well.
Yeah, it's a great question. And the beauty of the Mangum Economic Consulting reports is they go through that level of detail. Now that you're behind your screen, can you see this slide again?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
I'm happy to share this with everybody. It's embedded within the report, but it goes to the specific question that you're asking with regards to first round direct output, second round indirect output, and then it's aggregated. And you are correct that the overall direct economic impact is greater with row crops, and the second round indirect is roughly equivalent, but you see at the bottom on both table 11, which is the current row crops, table 9, the sheep grazing operation, and these numbers are backed by folks with a lot more economic modeling expertise than I have, and I trust that, or I hope that this information here can help answer your questions. And if not, we can definitely put you in touch with the folks at Mangum who did this analysis for us.
And Scott, I want to jump in and just kind of piggyback on what Mike just touched on, because you bring up a good point. When we're looking at these numbers in the economic report, one thing we kind of have to be careful or cognizant of is that this report is specific to this project. So looking at kind of the range of folks in here, Northern Virginia, Essex County, even within the state, it would be difficult just to kind of like plug and play numbers and even take it over to Culpeper County. The economic impact, those numbers are very specific to this project. So I just want to kind of like put that disclaimer out there. So.
Well, Eric, do you want to tell us a little bit more from your perspective on the project?
Yeah, so just a very quick background on me. I'm a Virginia native, went to school at Montana State in Bozeman, studied animal science, bounced around the West for a little bit, had a lot of experience, large range-based grazing operations, a lot of focus on regenerative grazing, rotational grazing, whatever you want to call it in this day and age. I made the mistake of trying to get my wife to move to Montana in the wintertime, and so we live in Virginia now. I came back, I'm a first-generation farmer, didn't inherit any land, and so I was raising beef cattle down here around Richmond, found it really difficult to compete with the row crop interests in the area. And I had to work an off the farm job and was basically about to give up farming. I switched over to sheep, found an opportunity in solar, and about 6 years ago I was running 100 sheep, and now we run about 1,500 sheep. Our main base is in Charles City County, Chesapeake Bay watershed, and we've been solar grazing for about 6 or 7 years now. So Open Road approached me because they identified really early on in this project that not only was the project, some of the characteristics of the project, the existing agricultural infrastructure lended it to kind of being a good opportunity to incorporate sheep grazing from the start, which doesn't normally happen on solar projects. But they also, I think, read the room in Fauquier County and saw that agriculture was going to have to be a vital part of this project. So I've been working with them for about 2 years, kind of helping to build out just kind of the specifics of the project, and also give them the information they need to build this kind of best-in-class project. So at that, I can kind of, if anybody has some specific agrivoltaic questions or anything specific to the grazing or about the economic report, I can kind of speak to any of that.
Eric, this may be an impossible question to ask, let alone answer, but we're looking at somewhere between 150,000 and maybe 700,000 acres of utility scale solar in Virginia. And, I'm wondering if it were possible to graze sheep under all of that. Are we talking about increasing the sheep population by a factor of 1,000, or, what are the implications for like 100,000 acres of solar?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to answer it, no, I don't think it would be prudent to have sheep under all of it. And I don't think it's possible. The sheep and solar, I hate to use this expression, but it's the low hanging fruit. It benefits everyone. To speak to this project specifically, the infrastructure is there. The soil structure is going to be perfect for pasture. There's an established livestock industry in Fauquier County, which may not exist in Essex County or any number of counties. That doesn't mean that you can't build that sheep industry there, but to answer your question, no, I don't think, 150,000 acres of solar is ever going to have sheep on all of it, but the opportunities do exist. I'm a first generation farmer, and I would not be farming if it weren't for solar and the opportunities it provides me and the access to land. So I think that's one thing we do have to be careful when we talk about agrivoltaics. I think, big picture, there's going to need to be more research from the land grant university side about in the agrivoltaic space about crops under panels, some of that's kind of stuff. But this project specifically, and many projects like it are going to be perfect for it, especially if it's identified at the forefront like this one is.
I've got a question for Mike and Eric. This might have been answered elsewhere, but are you guys doing any sort of academic or just research in general on the outcomes of these projects, either from the native plants, the BMPs, the economic output of the sheep?
Yeah, I'll jump on it first, and then if Mike has something to add, he can. Right now, if you look up anything related to the economics of, and I'll use solar grazing specifically, and Mike can touch on the rest of it, but no information really exists, or very little, and most of it, really isn't verified. It might be kind of just like word of mouth. So Open Road actually, at probably great expense and a lot of time, we put together this kind of like economic analysis, and to my knowledge, I don't think I could find another one right now that exists. So it's a good thing that it's at least getting started. As far as the rest of the analysis, I don't think, moving forward, I think, the opportunities exist. This project's still in development, but you're exactly right. I think, all over, whether it's the stormwater BMP, vegetation establishment, all that kind of stuff, I definitely think we need some more verified research. So,
Well, at the very least, it'll be another anecdotal situation to add to the pile of evidence. So, yeah, glad to see this project.
What is the current land use of those acres, and what's the current vegetation on there?
yeah, so the total parcel size, I believe, is 836 acres, and I believe 580 acres of it currently is in corn, soybeans, winter wheat rotation. And then the rest is, buffers. I believe there's some timber, and a little bit of lawn space, edging, that sort of stuff. And then there is an agricultural complex, silos. It was formerly a dairy facility.
So then my follow-up question, have any developers, or have you all looked at utilizing, state cost share conservation programming for, crop to grassland conversion, and to establish, forages before panels are built? Talking about having to go back in with like a contractor's mix and straw, etc. But it seems like if you're going into a crop field, if you were to establish forages like 6 months to a year in advance, that would eliminate a lot of issues. And maybe it would even provide a better opportunity for successful establishment of deep-rooted natives, versus trying to establish the native warm season grasses and establish standard perennial grasses, which is proven to be pretty challenging for folks without using herbicides to eliminate the competition. So I'm just curious, kind of, if that's something you've looked at, and whether that, what's the plan for going from a contractor's mix of rye and fescue, which is pretty vigorous and competitive, to a native that's slower growing.
Yeah, Jacob, Mike here, great question. And I think it's something that we should connect offline on, because there's sort of a very interesting balancing of the interest, where when you do the temporary stabilization, you want it to take as fast as possible for the temporary stabilization of the very top layer of the soil, but that may be in conflict with the long-term interest of the seed mix. And the sequencing of when that's done what we've actually seen is that on some installations, it's best to do the perimeter control measures first. You have to do that per the erosion sediment control handbook, and then come back and do the infill grading, if any, right? And really what you're doing there is just disking and taking out any of the ruts that would come from the row crops, because the topography of this site is quite flat, and we don't expect much, if any, cut fill. And that we're actually seeing that you do the temporary stabilization at that point before driving piles, rather than doing the pile driving and then doing the contractor's mix. So it's an area of growth and learning in terms of the sequencing of the seed and straw, and also what mix goes down when. And if that's an area that you're looking at, would love to get your contact info from Eric and, understand what you're seeing as the best practice there, and see if it can be incorporated into the plans.
That's good. Thanks.
Okay, I just forwarded 3 items from Mike to the group, except for Kate, who I don't have your email, so Luke can forward to you. And for Kevin Cast with PEC, I don't have your email. So if you email me at ejames7@me.com, I will forward it to you, Kevin. Mike, you want to talk a little bit about the 3 documents, or the 2 PDFs you sent?
It's actually just the content that we had here. And in the chat window, I put out the links that I mentioned to the NREL PV Smart, along with a YouTube discussion with University of Minnesota and the Great Plains Institute, and then a Virginia Tech study. Kevin was kind enough to add some additional investigation that's going on. What's funny is we joined this group about a year ago, and one of the topics that came up is how things are evolving every single week, every single month, and every project should be evaluated on a case-by-case basis by the locality with the best information at that snapshot in time. A year ago, we could not present this information with as much understanding as we do today. And Eric has been really, really instrumental in taking his experiences in the field running sheep grazing operations to allow us to develop this. A very quick aside on this project and the unique attributes. There's on-site wells for water. There's on-site barn infrastructure that the project will control for the lambing activities and for times of inclement weather and in the off season, so that you can actually keep the herd on site. We believe this is very real, and we believe that best-in-class projects with the right type of fence, the right setbacks, the right vegetative screening around the perimeter, the right seed mix, the right topography, the right setbacks from all of the water features, maybe even installing tree tubes like we've talked with Deidre about, and are proposing on this to clean up the downstream watershed by going a step further and almost making it such that it's like a conservation project. That there's all these potential to add what we call co-benefits to the local ecosystem. And we're seeing it. And some of the projects that are being built across the country today have that bleeding edge of innovation because the site attributes have it, and because of all of the thoughtfulness that's gone into it. Most of the projects that are being constructed, that are being built today in Virginia, were permitted in 2020 or 2021. It takes that long to go to construction start. So there is some pollinator smart efforts that are underway, but we hope to be a resource to identify the areas of innovation to deliver co-benefits to the local ecosystem to further drive the compatibility and the community adoption. Because Eric is on the line, if there's any technical questions about the sheep grazing operation, I think we'd be happy to entertain those questions.
All right, I've got a non-sheep grazing question. And I apologize if I missed it while I was tracking emails here. Talk to me a little bit about the county revenue and how that's structured.
Sure. Yeah. For every project in Virginia, there are 3 buckets of county revenue. One is the increased assessed value of the real property, and that's a bucket of value in the Mangum report that you see a step up in the assessed value because the land value steps up through solar. The second bucket comes from the equipment that's installed on site, and that's either under the machinery and tool regime or the revenue share regime. The county has the choice to determine which they prefer. The revenue share is something that was presented by the solar industry to get out of the composite index, especially in counties where, adding a big project like this would have a pretty negative impact to the composite index for need-based funding for schools from the state. The revenue share gets out of that. And then the third bucket is through voluntary payments through the siting agreement. This project over the 40-year life, as proposed, will generate roughly $20 million in revenue to the county. So 40 years, 20 million, you can do the math, roughly 500 grand a year with 0 services provided by the county. No stormwater, sewers, no schools for the kids. It's quite a nice fiscal profile to the county to help keep taxes low. There's obviously the concern that at the end of the 40-year, well, that's going to create a hole in the budget from the revenue was there and whatnot. The first 2 buckets on the real property and on the revenue share, there's little flexibility, if any, on that. It's a prescribed formula and it is what it is. On the voluntary payments, there generally is an opportunity to shape those over the life of the project. So it most addresses the needs of the locality, provided that the different shapes are economically equivalent on a present value basis. So on that, we actually look at variants where it's all the voluntary payment paid up front, or like we did in King Queen, the majority was paid over the first 3 or 4 years to fund the county match on the broadband. And then there was a tail that went with it. Some counties say, I'm interested in an amount that escalates at 3% per year. And we do all that economic modeling, sitting down with county staff and the board members to identify different variants of the voluntary payment offerings that are economically equivalent and don't blow up the project economics, but are most shaped to address the budgetary needs of the county per the thoughts of county staff and county board of supervisors. Hope that helps.
Yeah, Tommy, you've got a question.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I got 2 or 3 questions. First of all, what's the physical location of this project as it relates to US 17? Is it going to be visible from 17 or is it farther east?
No, sir, it will not be visible from 17. The project is located south of Ebenezer Baptist Church, which is southeast of the Warrenton Fauquier Regional Airport.
Okay.
So if you and Ryan can send out the latest conceptual plan if desired on that thread.
I was just curious. Somewhere near the Flying Circus, then somewhere southeast of the airport.
That's right. Yeah, the main property is a farm called Timbuktu that the Messick family has owned for 100 years.
Is in the report, is there information about the land valuation, the increase in land valuation? Is that one of the tables? I'm not finding it yet.
If not in this report, it was in a previous report, and we can make sure that folks get that. Let's see. It should.
I'm looking at the June 23 Mangum paper.
Yes, sir. It appears as though table 3 has that information in it. Talking about.
Yeah, I skipped over it then. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Page PDF, page 11.
I was just curious.
Yes, sir.
the current status of the project. Where are you on this with the county?
Yeah, current status, we applied for a 2232 determination, as Fauquier County has a two-step process. You first have to get that approved before you can then file a special exception permit application. Most counties, that's combined. That was heard at the Planning Commission on April 20th, and they found it was not substantially in accord. So the natural step is to appeal it to the board. We were going down the path of appealing it to the board, but we actually have continued to really lean into the community engagement and have identified some improvements to the project to shrink the footprint around some particular areas. So we have pulled the appeal and are improving and shrinking the footprint in some critical areas and adding some more bells and whistles, and plan on reapplying later this summer, early fall, with a new and improved layout to then go back through the process and adding some additional details about the on-site grazing MOU and the opportunity for land purchased by the grazer, and just continuing to do community engagement. There was an event yesterday afternoon that Ryan and Eric led at the airport to continue to meet with folks and shape the proposal. One of the procedural items is once you file in March and then you get denied, you can't actually tweak that in the appeal. So we had to pull it, and we'll refile. Ryan, let me know if I missed anything or I'm misrepresenting it, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, that's exactly right on the process. Thanks.
Last question. Because of the size of the project, it would be assessed by the State Corporation Commission. Is that correct?
The conditional use permit, well, so no, it's DEQ PBR because it's below 150 megawatts.
Right, but it's if it's above 25 megawatts, the assessment will actually be done by the State Corporation Commission, is my understanding.
Assessment for the real property?
Not the real property, the equipment, the actual facility.
I see.
Real property, I assume, will still be assessed, but unless it was owned by a public service corporation like Dominion, it'll be assessed by the local assessor. But anything over 25 megawatts is assessed by the State Corporation Commission as far as the equipment.
It's a great,
except for the land.
yes, sir. It's a great question.
Is that addressed in that report? I'm still working my way through the report.
Yeah, the assessment on taxation on the capital equipment is included there in the Mangum report. My expectation is that the county would go the rev share route because it has an escalating profile over time rather than the M&T. And for that, it sounds like you know this better than I do in terms of the assessment of the capital equipment. But that may be a moot point if the county goes the revenue share route.
That's correct. If they go revenue share, then it would be. One of the questions that many of my colleagues in the assessment area, the revenue taxation area, are concerned about is if it is being assessed by the State Corporation Commission, you know, what it could be a little different than if the locality were assessing it. And that's strictly based on the fact that if it's 25 megawatts or more, the State Corporation Commission is going to be the assessing authority. But if the locality accepts revenue share, then it is moot. I do know one locality that has chosen not to do revenue share on their solar projects because they have determined that in the long run, they'll eventually make more or get more revenue taxing the equipment. But having said that, I was curious if I wanted to make sure that that was addressed in this in the report. I'm just not seeing it yet. To me, that's an important factor, is who is the assessing authority for the equipment.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's included.
That's my world. That's the world I live in. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no, it's great questions and we can take it offline.
Yeah.
We always want to do everything with full information. At the end of the day, we are happy to give the county the choice of M&T or rev share. It's roughly economically equivalent to us on a present value basis, the way we model the economics. So we'll work with the locality to determine what's best for the locality and support their passage of the rev share ordinance if they choose. That all come once if we're fortunate enough to clear the 2232 determination, which is sort of where we're at from a process perspective, with the refiling of the application later this year.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe offline, I would like to also talk about your project in King and Queen and get a little more information on that. But well, like I say, that's something we can talk about offline if that would be all right with you.
Happy to. Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
A couple clarifying questions for me. So you withdrew your 2232 appeal to the board, and you're reinitiating that process. You go back before the Planning Commission with this new and improved plan.
Correct. That is the plan. Yes, sir. That's the process. So we pull it, we improve it. The improvements are done. We actually introduced those to the community yesterday at the community event. And then, I don't know, in the next few weeks or so, we'll refile a new application to staff. Staff will review it, and then we'll be scheduled at the Planning Commission for their review.
Okay. Second of my two clarifying questions, and this goes back to the county revenue. Just to be clear, for all of us and me included, the three buckets. You've got the increased assessment on the land because of the improvements. And then, and you and Tommy were talking about the increased assessment on, or the assessment of the equipment or the revenue sharing. And those are the first two buckets. And that's going to be true for every project such as this, whether or not there is a siting agreement with voluntary contributions, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Hey, Sarah, that clarifies a discussion you and I were having the other day. Okay. Then the siting agreement is that third bucket, and that's totally optional whether a locality chooses to have that in their toolbox.
On paper, it's totally optional, but I don't know why it would be totally optional, given that they're the authority having jurisdiction.
I agreed. I was speaking in the world.
Yeah, and the siting agreement values in the proposal is not included in Mangum's analysis. That's an offer that we've sent to the board a few months back, and that's not included in Mangum's analysis.
Right. Well, because that's a totally negotiated between the parties, the local government and the developer, and it can be completely unique to the needs of the community, what the governing body would be asking for.
Yeah, back in the 2020 session, House Bill 1675 was the legislation that passed, and I think you and I, Eldon, talked about how that came a little bit from the landfill history. There's long lineage of those on the land use side that maybe use some structure to take something that folks know in another area and make it relevant to solar project siting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can basically throw anything into that mix.
Provided the use of the funds are for capital improvement projects. I believe the legislation is clear on that point. So it's not going to fund staff salary or whatnot.
Yeah, you're not funding the math and science ongoing program at the high school right now, but you might be building something.
For sure. Yeah, you could build a high school. Yeah.
Right. Tommy, you got another question?
Yes, I do. Two things. I've been going through your report, the Mangum report, and it does address the State Corporation Commission assessment of the solar facility. So that's in there. Some of it was in the notes. I just didn't see them. The second question goes back to something you said, Mike, about that the facility requires no services. I would beg to differ when it comes to fire. We've had issues with fire at our solar facility is certainly a potential anywhere. And that can be a tremendous cost to the locality.
And are you
Unless
seeing?
I missed something that you said. I thought I heard you say there were no cost for services.
Yeah, and it'd be good to. I'm ignorant to this point, so I'm asking from a place of curiosity. The source of the brush fire, was that from the solar array?
I think the determination was the third fire we had. The answer was yes. There was an electrical issue that caused the brush to catch fire. And then it quickly spread with 40-mile-per-hour winds that we were experiencing that day.
Mhm.
And it could have been very serious, obviously. But there was a technician on site at the time because the ownership of the facility had just changed hands. And my understanding is the new ownership had somebody there that day when the fire happened. Now, was it something that technician did? I don't know. I'm speaking strictly based on things I've heard talking to the folks from the fire department. But it appears that it was caused by something with the solar facility, at least the third fire. We've had 3.
Let me add something at this point. In our discussions months ago, I was in one of our discussions, I was referred to someone at VDM on that topic, and I had a conversation with that individual. That individual insisted he was not the individual that was an expert, and he didn't know who was at VDM, but he would advise the following, but he did not indicate that it was the policy of VDM. So I don't know that we'll find what I'm about to tell you written anywhere, because he just said, here's be my advice to anybody in the local fire departments. Worry about a fire if it gets outside the fence. If it's inside the fence, it's the problem of the solar folks. And he said, I'm not going to put that to you in writing. And so I'm not even going to identify the individual. But I think the informal conversations, that's the advice that are being given to local fire folks, which I find interesting, but that's what it is.
Yeah, and where I was going with the question, I would like to learn more from Mr. Blackwell. Field fires happen in hot, dry environments, and it's a known circumstance. The frequency and the consequence of the need to tend to fires with a solar installation versus row crops. My thoughts, my hunch, my suspicion is that there's no additional cost to the locality of a solar project being installed relative to row crops. I can investigate data on that and see if we can come back to it. But if I said that there's 0 services provided by the county, maybe the clarifying point is 0 additional services relative to the current land use. And that's based upon a premise that there's no added likelihood of fire, a brush fire, field fire with the solar installed versus not. But, you know, there's probably some information out there, and I don't discredit or disagree. I don't know anything about the source of the fires that they've seen in Essex. I'm sorry that they've seen 3 fires. What you're saying in terms of just let it burn within the field and let it burn out, that's what we've heard as well.
Deirdre, did you have a question?
Yeah, this is probably more of an operational question with regard to establishment of ground cover and grazing. Typically, contractors mix includes cool season grasses, or they're dominantly cool season grasses. And warm season grasses pretty much take a longer time to establish. What do you anticipate as a lag time between completion of construction of the site and establishment of the site and introducing grazers, sheep, on that land? And this gets into stormwater concerns and soil issues as well, and the integrity of the soils.
It's a great question, and it sort of ties to the discussion we had with Jacob from American Farmland Trust. Eric, do you have thoughts? I know what we're proposing in terms of the conditions.
Eric had to drop off for a 10 a.m. meeting.
Okay. So in what the proposed special exception conditions that we're working with the local community on, the establishment of the on-site grazing is by year 2 of operation of the solar facility because of the break-in period and the conversion from the temporary stabilization mix to the permanent seed mix. And Deirdre, if you have thoughts on the sequencing and the seed mix and whatnot, Ryan and I would love to come swing by your office and chat about this further, set up another call, especially given your intimacy and knowledge of seeds for this specific region, right? It's very region and soil specific, but that sequencing is highly relevant to the success of the Buzz and Fuzz, what we're calling it, which is a pollinator friendly, deep rooted vegetation, but then is also the appropriate forage for the sheep. We're working with a group called Monarch Seed Supplier on the seed mix, and maybe Ryan can send you the specific seed mix that they've recommended for the site, and then we can continue the conversation if possible.
Okay, and following up on that, sometimes, well, when you make those conversions from cool to warm season grasses, you have emergence of those, continued emergence of those cool season grasses. How do you propose to control that?
I think I was using the phrase contractor mix colloquially for the temporary stabilization mix. And it's, I was being imprecise, right? But I think the erosion sediment control handbook establishes in chapter 32 or whatever it is, temporary stabilization, that you have to seed and straw site very, very soon after disturbance. And that seed mix, the narrow goal of it is temporary stabilization, right? And there's a balancing act between that to prevent downstream stormwater events or erosion sediment control events with the permanent seed mix for permanent stabilization, which will be the seed mix on site. So I don't have the specific answers to your questions right now, but I would like to dig in further to look at what seed mix should be installed for temporary stabilization to satisfy the requirements and perform that particular use, which is different than the use of the permanent seed mix, if that makes sense. And if there's any conflict there where there'd be a predominant species that would overtake from the temporary to the permanent, that we want to be very mindful of that in terms of the two different seed mixes and what's going down when and how to address that concern.
Yeah, I just thought 2 years to grazing seems a little ambitious. That's all.
It won't be. It won't be. Yeah, we'll fold in. So at full capacity, we expect about 400 head of sheep on site. But that on the front end of the process, it'll probably be 100, 150, because the density of the forage and the maturity of the actual vegetative growth will take some time to grow in, and we'll then add more sheep as time goes on.
Okay, well, thank you.
So
Has there been
is that
anything
about
around?
Sorry to talk over you,
Go ahead.
Jacob. I was just quick clarification. Is that about like 1 sheep per acre then?
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. Jacob,
I
did
was
you
just curious. Has there been any discussion around revenue generated from potential carbon credits through carbon sequestration of grazing? And if so, does that revenue go back to the grazer, or does it go back to the developer and the landowner?
Yeah, there's been very, very little discussion or focus on that, like the credits that you can get by going from tillage to zero till. I believe the short answer is that the robustness of the carbon sequestration opportunity in the markets is not matured at this point, but it's an area to look into. It would be something that maybe, a cherry on top, but I don't think is going to move the needle. But sounds like that's an area of expertise for you. In addition to the conversation about the seed mix, if we could, collaborate offline, that'd be great to see whether there's economic value there that can, the way this all works is any economic value that is on the table eventually gets passed down, in my perspective, to opportunities to go even further on the ecosystem co-benefits. We're proposing planting tree tubes after some work with Deidre in the downstream watershed. That comes at a cost, and it comes with the downstream water quality benefits, but it's not have to have, but it's something that we're choosing to do because this project has a clean interconnection profile on the overhead transmission lines. That's one of the ways that we're able to, take this project further than other projects have gone. If there's additional value in the carbon sequestration value, then, maybe that's a little bit more juice in the voluntary payments, or there's additional design considerations that we can take into account. So thank you for surfacing it.
Okay, other questions? Mike, Ryan, thank you guys very much for the very robust discussion and being willing to answer questions. Did you want to add something?
I always like at the end of a call, make sure I got the action items. I have an action item on the seed discussion that we just had with Deidre and our friends from American Farmland Trust, and a follow-up on the carbon sequestration credits. There was also a sidebar request from Brian from Friends of the Rappahannock to send them along the particular location. Ryan and I sent along the KMZ of the acreage we have under control, the Google Earth, and then the updated site plan. And then you, Eldon, distributed the information to the rest of the group. Are there any other follow-up items for us to make sure that we're tracking here?
Brian, is that fit with your question?
Yeah, I was just gonna say we host a regional conservation symposium in October, and for the Rappahannock River Roundtable, and this could potentially be of great interest, presenting this case study. And didn't know if y'all are local enough that you'd be able to provide a session for Q&A.
We'd love to. That's the right answer. I mean, we want to take the industry further and try and find more community adoption. Ryan's based in Charlottesville. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, but I'm in Virginia every other week. So if we can use that thread that Ryan and I sent the information to you and coordinate around it, it'd be our pleasure. And we would appreciate the opportunity to, do a similar discussion with that audience.
Great.
Tommy? You're on mute.
I found the article about the fire that occurred in Essex in March of 2022. I'm curious, Mike, I can send that to you. Eldon, would you just like me to send it to you, and would the group be interested in it?
I can forward it to the group.
Yeah, it's a discussion about the fire and the suspected cause of the fire.
Okay.
Obviously, fire has been a big concern in our one facility here in Essex, and has generated a lot of angst in the community. So it's something that just like to make sure that we continue to address with, when we talk about the utility solar scale.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know on the Walnut project in King and Queen, one of the things that we did, because there's not, it's rural and there's not fire hydrants in the area, we actually agreed to in the siting agreement to deed over like 2/10 of an acre of land along the road that we owned, and then pay for an elevated water tank and a pump, so that in that region, the region would then benefit from the fire trucks being able to go to that area, fill up with water to address any field fires. And that was something that we worked with the emergency response team in King and Queen County, and then incorporated that in the siting agreement. It's an area that, you know, if it's a concern that is raised in Fauquier County, and it sounds like something we need to be mindful of, we'd be happy to take a look at it and see what the current services are and whether there's going to be added costs with the project. If we're lacking, you know, access to water in this region of the county, this idea of co-benefits that these projects can provide if they're really, really thoughtfully done, and, you know, adding a storage tank that's elevated that can then supply a fire truck, and that we pay for the pump, deed the land to the county, give them access, and pay for the tank. Those are all things that we like, those type of discussions where a project can provide a specific response to the concerns that's raised on the project, but then hopefully there's community benefits that can come from it as well. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
I think we've been excluded from siting agreements with our project here in Essex County. So, or, you know, we kind of wish we'd have come along a little later, but we were one of the early ones. So maybe we are been a training ground for some of these things and can help with best practices going forward. But I'll send that information to Eldon if you'd like to distribute it to the group. Thank you very much.
All right. Other questions or assignments for Mike for his task list? Okay, next item on the agenda is just to touch on how the commission received the final draft of the report. I'll just say, and anybody who's here who was there that day, there are a couple, the reception was a lively discussion. I'll just say especially the members of the assembly were full of questions, and full of questions. I'll just put it that way. One of the outcomes of that, and I had to smile when Mike was talking about the emerging nature of things, or the changing nature of things, is that for the time being, the chairman wants to leave the report as a draft report because of the emerging nature of just about everything associated with solar facility development. And so I think there will be things added to that. There may be some lessons learned from this discussion today. Let's see. I'll open it up for anybody who was there that day. I know Tommy was. I think Sarah was listening online. If anybody wants to add their reaction to the reaction from the members of the commission to the report. Tommy, you're on mute.
I don't know why I can't get that right. Thank you. I thought it was interesting that one of the members, my senator who had, I don't think I'd seen him in any meetings, he had some interesting questions. And it was as if the work that was done all year long is, you know, why wasn't it completely up to date as of the June meeting? But anyway, I thought it was very good. I still appreciated his questions because it just, I mean, this report is primarily for those in the General Assembly, so they need to be able to use this information. I think it's definitely, just even as the date that you were making the report available to the commission, it's like you said, things were changing. And so I'm not sure how the technical committee is going to continue to handle it, but if the chairman wants to leave it as a draft and keep adding to it, then I guess there's a task there to be filled. Is that correct, Eldon?
Yeah, I would say that. Don't ask me exactly what that's going to look like.
Right.
We're just gonna learn new things as we go along. We did, kind of get it. That whole topic got us into discussion of agrivoltaics that most people on the commission had never heard that word, and I had to admit I hadn't heard the word just as much as a few weeks before the commission meeting, and explain it to them. And of course, that kind of leads us into where we are today. I want to take us to something that's not on the agenda, but very closely related. Sarah, do you want to talk a little bit about what you have been working on?
I can just say that working for the Valley on behalf of the Valley counties, the Alliance for the Shenandoah Valley tries to provide support to the counties, their staff, or anybody who is working on solar because it's so complicated. So we've had some workshops in the past and posted something on the website that was sort of guidelines for localities, but for anyone. Just trying to stay abreast of all these kinds of topics, because when they get an application, like all the localities, what to look for. So we were trying to update that, and our experience has been exactly what the sort of theme is today, that things are changing so fast. There are always more examples, more issues, but we have developed a draft, and Eldon was kind enough to review it. And so we will post that as recommendations just to pull from. Where we go or how this relates to, this has been an extraordinarily helpful process for me to listen to. And I'm not sure what we can do that would help each other. So I would sort of leave that for Eldon, kind of knows both pieces.
I'll just simply say they're very complementary pieces. There's some overlap. There's also some areas that each report addresses that are outside of the other. So I'll just say they're complementary documents, and when you get it posted, we'll make sure that we pass it along to the folks on this end, because I think they'll find it helpful as well. Okay, anybody want to pick Sarah's brain? Okay, you certainly can reach out to her offline. Going forward, you see our schedule for the rest of the year, technical committee meetings, and I am open to agenda item suggestions. I don't have hard agenda items at this point for those remaining meetings. I would imagine solar is going to be part of that discussion, but we do have the opportunity to deal with some other topics. So I'll be discussing that with the chairman, but also if you've got some thoughts there. Jacob, is there something from what you guys are working on? I know you've been working on some projects, because one of your colleagues interviewed me some months back for some work that they were doing. And I just wondered if there's something that you can bring to the table that folks around in this group might find of interest.
Yeah, we've got a lot of different things going on. Is there a particular area of interest?
Well, and your colleague was from Memphis who interviewed me, and I'm sorry I'm not remembering his name, but it was a specific kind of questions on a
Lamb.
Pardon me?
Brooks Lamb.
That is it. Yes.
So he does work around land access and land protection, those types of things.
Okay, and there was some Virginia specific work that he was doing.
Yep. So we've got a Regenerate Virginia report that's out. You can look it up. One of the component, pretty much what that looks at is, all the facets of regenerative agriculture between all sectors, livestock, crop production, veggie horticulture production. And so, agrivoltaics, smart solar siting is part of that report in Virginia. Also land access and a program called Buy, Protect, Sell, where AFT has funding to help buy land, protect it, and then sell it to new and beginning producers. And that initiative is working with local land trust in Virginia. We have a project going on in Greene County right now. So somebody could go into further detail about that. We have a cover crop grazing project that we're doing up in Culpeper right now. We've got our new climate smart beef project that's coming out for the mid-Atlantic, the Southeast, and Alabama, or Texas and Oklahoma, that's looking at carbon credits and mentoring networks with producers. We've got the bird-friendly beef project that we're doing with Virginia Working Landscapes and Piedmont Environmental Council. So yeah, there's a few different things that we have going on that we could certainly could chat about.
Okay, let you and I touch base offline and see what might be worthwhile.
Certainly. And I'll also, Brian put in the chat there, the bee-friendly beef event, Dr. Pat Kaiser, he's coming up next week from University of Tennessee on August 3rd. So that, I believe, is full. They're not accepting any additional registration. That's taking place at the Smithsonian. But while he is up here, I'm actually putting the finishing touches on a last-minute flyer, and we're going to have him do a breakfast meeting on August 4th, that Friday from like 8:30 to 11:30 at Kinlock Farm in the Plains. And so if anybody's interested in coming up to learn more about native warm season grass establishment and grazing and haying those natives, we'd love to have you up to that. So I can send that flyer. I'm going to make a couple of tweaks and then we'll be getting that sent out today.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for that suggestion, Brian. That was one of the ones that my ears went up when carbon credit program was mentioned. Okay, let me talk a little bit about upcoming River Basin Commission meeting. We'll be meeting in Orange County. Matter of fact, I have a call right after this on specific location. I think we may be at the, I guess it's Emergency Services building right near the airport. But I'm going to be confirming that with the county administrator's office later this morning. Matt Wells will be with us to talk on kind of a high level about what's going on at DCR. Talk to the commission about that, similar to what Mike Rolban did relative to DEQ at previous meeting. Terry Lasher will be with us on what's next now that the Sentinel Landscape designation was approved. And so that's a project that we've been following closely, and so we'll talk more about that. And then thanks to Michelle, we've got Chesapeake Conservancy coming and talking about the BMP opportunity prioritization tool. And Michelle, you want to put you on the spot. You want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. Those of you who have attended RRC's Land Use and Environment Committee meetings have had some presentations on the draft tool, but this was part of the Upper Rappahannock Watershed Plan that we had a NIFWIF grant for. And it looked at both ag and urban BMPs, and essentially what it's intended to do is be able to prioritize ag and urban BMPs on the landscape. It's an online GIS tool that the Chesapeake Conservancy developed for us to be able to make decisions either on a small scale for such like a farm, for example, or a county or a region. So the final tool will be available by the time the River Basin Commission meeting is.
Oh, all right. Then we are going to have one more agenda item, and VDM will be back to do a demo of the stream and rain gauge dashboard that they did a training session on for all the emergency managers about, what was that, about a week ago, Michelle?
Yes.
It wasn't quite up and running, but they expect to have, well, it was partially up and running, let's put it that way. They expect to have that all up and running and going. And so we're going to demo that dashboard for the elected officials. So finally, let's see, 10 years after we first started talking about it in 2012, 11 years. So that's plans for the commission meeting on September 27th. With that, I think I've covered everything. Any parting words from anybody?
Just thanks everybody for giving us the time to compare notes on this stuff. The more we're chatting, I think the better the outcomes will be. So appreciate Eldon for convening this and everybody for taking the time to lean in on this stuff.
And thank you, Mike. We really appreciate it. Tommy, anything?
Well, since you asked, I want to thank Mike for being so open and, his discussion of this project in Fauquier has been very, very helpful. And the material that you provided, Mike, will be very useful going forward. And I thank you for that.
Happy to do it. If you want to learn more about Walnut down in King Queen, ask Tom Schwartzwalder about Mike Volpe's spreadsheets and he'll get a chuckle out of it.
If I can find Tom, he's retired.
Yeah.
But he's somewhere around, I'm sure.
I'm sure. Yeah.
We'll track him down.
Okay, with that, all right, everybody, you're going to be released a little early. Thank you very much, and thank you to the new faces who have joined. And Jacob, I'll be in touch probably sometime next week.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.